Made you look. Hey, this is just a marketing technique. With a million videos, 10 billion videos out there, you need something to grab somebody's attention. Hi, I did that to get your attention. You gotta have some kind of marketing technique, right? So I figured with a billion videos out there, you gotta have something, right? Hey, my name's Ed. I'm 62 years old. I want to do a video. I'm going to try to condense it as small as I can. Might end up being in parts. I hope you stay tuned for it. I'm looking to try to just boom, 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 talk to you. I'm 62, so I've been around a little while. Born in 1954. We were just out of the dinosaurs back then, really. We seen T-Rexes running around. Actually, we had black and white TVs, and you know, they were about 13 inches, fuzzy rabbit ears. People don't even know what rabbit ears are. But I didn't even know The Wizard of Oz was in color until I got married and had my first color TV. So back in the 70s. So we were behind the curve in a lot of things, where I was anyway. But I grew up at a very, you know, and how do you start something of this nature? It's a big subject that I want to talk about. It's where we are as a country, because being born in 1954, I've seen a lot of things happen. I've, you know, changed over the years from a hippie type guy, I guess if you want to call it, to a more conservative guy. I know I just lost everybody except maybe 2 people out there. That's it I got. But I hope you hang with me, because this is kind of a philosophical discussion, if you will, essay, I guess, of my life. What I've learned, what I see happening in our country right now is amazing. It's really, you'd have to know how life used to be to understand how much of a paradigm shift we are going through in our society right now. And I think it's kind of a dangerous thing that we see happening in our country. And the reason why I can say that is because if you study history, if you know world history, if you know European history, the history of World War II, you know American history, and I know America's not perfect, okay? It never has been. But there's something about us you have to admit, because why do people want to come here? Why do people from all over the world for many years, for decades and eons, wanted to come to America? We had something that was unique and different, right? I mean, that's why people come here. People don't say that about, I can't wait to get to Russia, or I want to go to China. Of course, now you do, because it's changed there as well, and it's mainly for business purposes. But for centuries, a couple of centuries now, we have been a nation that people were drawn to. People admired, people looked up to and respected the United States of America. And kids nowadays don't realize that. I mean, we were a very respected nation. Most of the kids today, you know, we'll talk about that, you know, why you think maybe the way you think. But I'm just trying to give you a perspective of this change that's taking place in our country that I don't think is very healthy for us. And I'm hoping that, how can you say a speech in 10 minutes to cover a subject that covers centuries of information? It's impossible. But nobody wants to watch YouTube videos for 5 hours. Nobody wants to watch movies or anything that last 2 hours. There's my phone. Let me get it. Speaking of which, look where we are. I mean, I can get news, I can get whatever I want off these phones. we only had one source of information back in my day when I was being raised, and that was the television pretty much, and radio. But radio was mostly music and things like that. There was news reports. But we got most of our information from books. That's those things made out of paper, which they don't even have. They use these things now, or computers. But maybe this is a good thing that has happened, because I'll kind of shift gears here maybe for you, that we, I'm putting it on vibrate, I remember, speaking of the news, I remember realizing one day that we used to think the news was not biased. We just thought they were just presenting something that had happened and reporting on it. And I can still remember when I began to realize, when people started pointing things out to me, that the news was biased, that it would lean one way or the other, that it had a slant that it was trying to project many times. And that was a shock to me the day that I kind of began to understand that I always thought it was just news, and you believed whatever was coming out of Walter Cronkite and the others of that era, that what they were saying was true. And I'm not saying it wasn't true, but it did have a lot of bias to it. It had a political slant to it, whether it was left or right. There was slants to the news. And so that's what my subject matter is about, is what do we know as true anymore? I mean, what is truth? You know, what is, who can we believe? And I believe that one of the things, I'm getting way ahead of myself, but it's because of the phone call. I wanted to share a little bit more about my life, but that's really not the subject matter, other than understanding I've seen a lot of things, and I've grown through a lot of things. I'm like your Uncle Eddie, okay, that's been around a while, and I've seen, the charlatans, I've seen the snake oil salesman. I bought from the snake oil salesman. I bought a lot of things that I realized was junk. It wasn't real. And I'm hoping that through this video that I can pass on some of the things that I've learned, maybe, and maybe make you think a little bit about what is truth. Where can we get truth, and are you getting the truth from authority figures? Okay, we'll assume that your parents are giving you the truth, okay? But I guess if you live in Afghanistan, that's not a true statement, because they teach their kids to do a lot of bad things, right? So just because it's an authority figure, in that extreme case that I just, they're teaching the kids to go blow themselves up. I mean, that's horrible. But in the, and that's their parents, right? So you got to realize that there's different philosophical beliefs in the world. There's different ways that you can approach life. And we've divided it up into categories, and you see that. We see that in this election cycle, that it's left versus right, red versus blue, and they subcategorize that into black versus white, gay versus straight, Mexicans against the whites, and illegals, and all these different things are categories where, they get people fighting with one another, or arguing and debating. And it's very hard to figure out, well, who's telling the truth? And it goes back to television. It goes back to our sources of information, authority figures, whether it is your parents, because some people are raised in different environments, maybe back in the South, where they were raised to be prejudiced. And I've met them over my many years that I've been on the earth, where they would say the N-word and they didn't think anything of it. Or, just different, and I met blacks that are racist. I met Mexicans that are racist. I'm Mexican. I'm half Mexican and half white. The whites said on that side of the family said things about this other side of the family. I've seen both sides in and out, back and forth. And so, but one thing that I did have that I hope can help you is I looked for truth. I wanted to know what is true, you know, what's right, what's good, what's bad, what's, you know, where are you going to go when you die? I mean, all those thoughts, you know, how far is the universe? I mean, where does it end? Is it going? Is it continuing going? Where's it going to, you know? Is there a brick wall at the end? Then what's on the other side of the brick wall? Who put the bricks there, right? All these deep questions of life. So truth, I think that is what we're missing, and it's being obscured because of all the dust and smoke and mirrors and left and right and up and down and back and forth, and history, you know, is bad, and everything people did then was bad and everything is good now, and it's really hard to figure out what is truth in all this mix. And so, you know, this would be a year-long study. So how do you condense it down without sounding biased, you know, without me sounding biased? And all I can tell you is, and I'm sure somebody else can tell you something totally different than what I'm saying, but I am 62. I have been around the block a few times. I am diligent in trying to study subjects and study, you know, things that are happening in the world, whether it's history, whether it's, you know, current events, whether it's political, whether it's religious, you know, political and social sciences. I enjoy those types of things because life is really cool. It's a mystery. It has a lot of things that connect together. And so I know I'm rambling, but I'm hoping you see, I'm trying to set the stage that I'm not just somebody that somebody programmed, okay? I have looked for truth. I want to know the truth. And just very quickly, I did that with religion or faith or spirituality. I don't want to get on the wrong bus, okay? There's a lot of buses going out of the station, but I want to make sure I'm on the right bus, okay? So I tried and looked at, you know, things that different faiths, different religions, different world religions, different United States religions that were developed here in the United States. And I'm not going to preach at you, okay? All I'm going to tell you is I looked for truth in it. I didn't want some man's opinion. I didn't want a good idea or a warm and fuzzy. I want to know, can this be backed up, what you're saying? You know, I mean, is it verifiable? You know, can we verify things? And I think that's what we're missing, is there's a lot of people say things, whether it's on the internet, on the web, you know, or TV or radio. People say things, but is it truth? Is it verifiable? And I think you got to learn to know what your resources are, because as I found out from Walter Cronkite and others in the media of that day, that they were biased towards a certain stance, towards a certain political stance. And I didn't know that because I was young. I didn't know. You just knew what you saw on the boob tube. So, so I think if I can do anything is to help you to think that just because somebody's on TV, it don't make them an authority necessarily. And they could be an authority. But if they have a bias, they lean left, they lean right, then you got to filter that. You have to make the conscious decision that, is what he says true because he's on the left or he's on the right? Or is it true because it is true? It's a good principle. And as a young person, you don't know that. I mean, you haven't developed enough maturity and understanding of how things work. And I'm not saying, please, see, I'm going to lose another group of people now. All I'm saying is, how do you know something is true just because someone says it? Is there verifiable evidence to back up a claim, to back up a statement, to back up a hypothesis, to back up, some invention? Why should I believe in you? I think that should be what everybody is looking for. Because where we are today in society is, there's people that are charlatans. And it's like you're saying, what? It's the epiphany I had with Walter Cronkite, that he had a certain political stance, and his, reporting kind of leaned that way. And I didn't know that until, I started studying, these types of topics. And I'm not saying he's a charlatan either. I'm just saying people are biased. You're born biased. If you're born a certain race, you're biased towards that race. If you're born in a certain city or a town or a neighborhood, you're biased. Maybe you don't like your neighborhood, but we have biases that we develop and we're kind of bent towards. And it's not necessarily wrong, because there's so many different types of people. We all know that. So many different types of races and ethnicities and so on. But out of all that, what is truth? What's true here, what's true there? Truth is truth, And so realize that just because someone's an authority figure, and it could be, let's start at the basics. It could be a family member. It could be a teacher. It could be a professor. It could be a politician. It could be a world leader. And it could be a religion, okay? Just because they're in a place of authority doesn't mean what they're saying is true, and that it hasn't been affected by some kind of bias. And that's my point. Is I think we've lost the ability to reason, to think on our own, to investigate, versus using, allowing our emotions to control and dictate. Well, they said it, so it must be true. Well, is it true? Is it or not? And so that brings us to, I think I've developed at least the idea that think, reason, logic is good. I don't know if you know this, but the word for God is logos, which we get our word logic, okay? Logos. In the beginning was Logos, the creator, the brilliant mind of God. See, I got religious and I didn't want to do that. I'm trying to be intellectual. Okay, but logic is good. That's how we got to the moon. That's how we invented things. That's how we invented medicines, and technology was knowledge, and using that, logical principles of science. And that's another area where science has become politicized. It's not science anymore in a lot of the, disciplines. Some of it still is, but when we get into things that can be used politically, they don't use science anymore, evidence. They go for more of a political persuasion. And that's, again, is it true? That's what we want to know. Is something true? And just because it's an authority figure, that they use an argumentum, what they call ad baculum, where, power, or argumentum ad populum, where it's popularity makes it right, or the powerful person makes it right, or some authority figure makes it right. And that's not true, the guy, Samuel L. Jackson, he can sell you credit cards, but is it the best credit card? He's a salesman. He's going to have a bent towards that. Who's paying him, right? So, anyway, might or popularity, it does not prove truth. Just because someone's more popular doesn't mean that they're right at everything. The German, by popular opinion, voted in Hitler, right? Were they right? Was the majority right? No. Majority rule is not always an indicator of what's truth, what's truthful. And so you have to use your brain, you have to use logic, you have to have some kind of compass, I would hope, in making decisions, I mean, I think we know that cannibalism is not good. I don't think, right? Okay. So you have to have some kind of morals, to make honest, good, right decisions that's good for you, good for your family, good for your community, good for your nation, and good ultimately for the world. So definitely morals have to come into the equation. You have to have, some kind of morals, because like Hitler or Pol Pot or the guy in Venezuela, or Saddam Hussein, who ran over people that he didn't like with a steamroller. Yeah, you got to have morals. You got to know right from wrong. We have to be able to, when we're searching for truth, know good and evil, right? I mean, just take one subject that's a big subject, and it's a subject of this election cycle, as it has been for the last 40, 50 years. That's abortion. Is that right or wrong? There's some on one side say yes, some on the other that say no. What is your moral basis to say it's right or wrong? And the left will bring up a side, and the right brings up a side. And I have made a moral choice of what I believe is right and wrong. Is that a human life, or is it not human? Is it some other creature? Is it a bird? Is it a banana tree? What is that? What are we dealing with there? How can someone be charged with murder of two people when it's called a fetus? I mean, these are questions. This is truth. This is what I think God allows us to think about and have to make decisions about in life. So I'm just putting this out that I hope people would realize that you have to make decisions on what truth is and who is giving you the what they say is the truth about a certain subject matter. And what makes it difficult today is that it seems to slant more towards one side than the other. There's a lot of outlets that promote one side, and there's very few outlets that promote the other. And in fact, what is very upsetting to me, and I think it gets to the heart of our subject, of what is truth, is in universities, where universities used to be the cauldron of ideas and debate and discussion as to these types of questions. Why are we here? Where are we going? Who are we created, or are we evolved? But they push out debate anymore. It's always one-sided. In fact, when someone of the opposition goes in to speak at universities, a lot of times they throw tomatoes, pies, they protest, they riot. They riot because they don't want to hear an opposite view. And you tell me that's healthy for a society where it's just one-sided, and that one side blocks anybody from hearing an opposing view. That's the exact opposite of what colleges were built for. That's why, that's why I think we're in a dangerous time, is because, excuse me, I'm Mexican and Okie, from Oklahoma. My dad had blonde hair and blue eyes. You wouldn't know that. But I was raised by a grandmother that only spoke Spanish. They said I only spoke Spanish when I was little. So I think backwards, and sometimes I speak backwards, because Mexican language, Spanish, is kind of backwards. So sometimes my verbs and nouns and adjectives get all messed up. So, excuse me. what we're talking about is that I forgot what we were talking about. That you know, we have to know truth. That they've locked. Excuse me. Back to the college idea. That the danger we're in is there's one side being presented not only in the colleges, but there's one side being presented on TV. There's one side being presented through Hollywood sometimes. And I don't mean to say it's 100%, but it's 80 to 90 plus percent of a philosophy that says we're right, you're wrong, you can't speak. Or you're irrelevant. You're marginalized because we're in power, you can't speak. Your opinion doesn't matter. Your opinion is bogus. Your opinion is not right. And that's the danger we are in. And that, I believe, is the danger we are in this election cycle, is that nobody is looking for the truth. They're listening to the left, they're listening to the right, but they're doing it on an emotional basis or a prejudicial basis or biased basis versus is the principles, which principles are right? What's best for our country? What's best for our nation? What's best for our families? What's best for our cities? What's best for all of us as a people? Not what, you know, and how can you get through to people if your message is always blocked, ridiculed, made fun of, and no one gets to hear this side? How hard is that? I mean, how hard is it to reach people when you can't speak, when you can't say, when you can't argue in and I don't mean argue in a fighting way, I mean argue and let's debate this, let's talk about it. And that's how America was great, is that we debated things, we talked about things, we didn't pick up a sword or a knife or a spear or a catapult and start fighting a war over it. We learned that debate is good and healthy in a democracy. But we cannot have honest debate if we don't have both sides of a story, you know. And you know, I'm glad that we're seeing that there's injustices, you know, on TV. It's overdone, and of course, politically, again, it's used as a political battering ram to batter with the left and the right. You know, I mean, that's what happens. But we discovered some issues, and we're dealing with those issues. You know, racial issues. And as we fought a civil war, and white people died over racial issues. So we're a nation that is not perfect, but my goodness, we do try to do what's right. And I guess this part of this little essay is just basically for people to think in logical terms and realize if you're on the left, there's a big bias that is going to be talking to you and saying all these things that's negative about the right. If you're on the right, they're biased towards them, and they're going to be saying things as well. But what you have to answer from your heart, from a logical, moral perspective, is what is right, what is truth. And you can't do that if you're only listening to one voice. You cannot. You cannot. You will never come to understand truth if you're only hearing one side. They thought the world was flat. Copernicus and Columbus and Newton and all those great thinkers, they figured things out differently. The world was round. They thought the earth was the center of the universe. But it was they considered it a geocentric universe. But Copernicus, a Polish astronomer, said no, the sun is the center of the universe. And it changed astronomy forever when people came to know the truth. But when one side controls everything, you can never come to the truth because they're biased. Everyone's biased. You're biased. unbiased. And I ask you to look for truth by listening to both sides. And don't be prejudiced just because, for whatever reason, you can come up with personal preference you like. That doesn't determine what is truth and what is right and what is good and what is best for each of us in our community, in our families, and in our nation. God bless. Thanks for listening this long, if you have listened this long. This is Uncle Eddie. I'm 62. I've been around the block. I've seen it, been there, done that, been on both sides of the issue. I used to be on the left and now I'm on the right. I used to think one way and that way. I used to not believe and now I believe. I'm talking about where we're going. Really, that's the ultimate truth that you can know, is where you're going to go when this is all over. And I'm not talking about this election. I'm talking about, have you thought about that one yet? That one day, 100 years from now, neither you or me will be here. Have you made that connection? That connection. God bless. Take care. Made you look.